The year is 1975 in the United States. A 20-year-long display of jungle warfare had just come to an end, the hippie movement was in full swing, and the country seemed to finally be at peace. Around the same time, one could buy a new car for about $5,000, a home for about $40,000, and kids could walk into a candy store and buy just about any bar they wanted for a dime. This was also the time you could have scooped up your favorite baseball or football franchise for around $10 million. Nowadays, your average MLB or NFL franchise is valued between $2 to $5 billion, with some of them easily exceeding over a 20,000% return on investment. Owning a franchise in 2025 is quite literally a modern-day goldmine, and we're going to do a deep dive on how this all unfolded. About 100 years after the United States signed the Declaration of Independence, and shortly after the American Civil War, a period of Reconstruction lasted for just over a decade. This period set the stage for industrialization, but it primarily helped address the legal, social, and political challenges America was facing. Post-war periods are typically tough for everyone, but one way for Americans to find closure and build community was by participating in sports. By the mid-19th century, baseball was gaining popularity throughout the United States, and it was eventually named the national sport. In 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings became the first official professional sports team in the USA, thus marking the origin of a meteoric rise. By 1876, 7 other professional baseball teams were established to form what we know today as the National League. And by 1882, an additional 6 teams were put together to form the American Association. After almost 2 decades of disorder, the American League was established in 1901, which gave birth to the 2-league system that still exists today. The first legitimate purchase of an MLB team occurred in 1911 when James Gaffney, an alderman and construction company owner, decided to purchase the Boston Red Sox, who were then known as the Boston Braves, for $187,000. A few years later, after Boston won the 1914 World Series, Gaffney sold the franchise to Percy Haughton for a reported $500,000. In 2025, the Boston Red Sox are now valued at $3.9 billion, which represents a 779,000% return on investment. But let's take a look at a few other franchise deals that really paid off. The Yankees, for example, are probably the most well-known team in baseball, and they're also the most valuable franchise at $7.55 billion. Just a couple generations beforehand, the team was purchased by Frank Farrell and William S. Devery for $18,000 in 1903. Now, had these gentlemen held on to the team, they'd be looking at a 43 million% return on investment, but the team has switched hands several times since then. Most recently, in 1973, the team was purchased for $8.8 million, which is still an 85,000% return. The story of American football somewhat resembles the idea of the American dream. When professional football first became a thing in 1920, most American citizens didn't know much about the sport, and it was nowhere close to being on the same level of popularity as baseball. The APFA, or American Professional Football Association, eventually became the NFL in 1922, and at the time, owning a franchise was relatively inexpensive. Franchises were so cheap, in fact, that a few men saw the potential in purchasing a franchise to hold for generations to come. One of those men was George Halas, who purchased the rights to the Chicago Bears in 1920 for a crisp $100 bill. Just over a century later, the Bears are now valued at $3.45 billion, which represents a 3.5 million% return on investment. The best part about this story is that the Bears franchise is still held by the Halas family. The current owner, Virginia Halas McCaskey, is his daughter, and they don't seem to have interest in letting go of the team anytime soon. The Chicago Bears, in addition to the Green Bay Packers, are the only 2 NFL teams that have existed since the league's inception, and the Packers would be a great example of staggering growth if it weren't for the fact that they're the only team that's community-owned with no individual profiteers. If we're looking for a fairly recent example, we can look to the San Francisco 49ers, who were founded shortly after World War II in 1946 and joined the NFL 3 years later in 1949. The team was purchased by Eddie DeBartolo Jr. for $17 million in 1977, and just 48 years later, the team is now valued at approximately $6 billion. In less than a lifetime, DiBartolo made a 35,000% return on investment and also added 5 Super Bowl rings to his mantle. Quite the accomplishment for just a 23-year span as an owner. The only other professional sports organization that's comparable to pro baseball or football is the National Basketball Association. The game of basketball is a little late to the party, and that's because the sport took a little longer to get established and therefore to get its professional organizations recognized. Nowadays, however, with the NBA's revenue exponentially increasing, the valuations of franchises are also exponentially increasing. The early investors are harvesting the fruits of their labors, and realistically, we probably haven't seen the top yet. Arguably one of the best examples of all time is the purchase of the Chicago Bulls in 1985 by Jerry Reinsdorf for $16.2 million. Just 1 year prior, the Bulls had selected Michael Jordan with the 3rd overall pick in the 1984 draft. But little did Jerry Reinsdorf know, his investment was about to pay off big time. On June 12, 1991, the Chicago Bulls, led by Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, won their first NBA championship. At the time, the Bulls had won a franchise record 61 games, and they had breezed through the playoffs with ease. By this point, Michael Jordan was already a star, and now that the team chemistry was on point, greatness was sure to come. The Bulls would go on to win 3 consecutive NBA championships between 1990 to 1993, and then they'd go on to do it again between 1995 to 1998. With a total of 6 championships in 1 decade, the Bulls became a true dynasty, and the value of the team exploded. Jerry Reinsdorf remains the owner of the team in 2025, and the team is now valued at $3.2 billion. His 40-year investment has netted him a ridiculous 19,653% return. In addition to the Bulls, teams like the Lakers and Celtics are valued at a pretty penny, largely in part to all the championships they've won. The Lakers, for example, were purchased for $20 million in 1979, and they're now worth $4.4 billion. A lot of the huge valuations for NBA teams remain to be seen because we're essentially in the parabolic phase of growth right now. We find ourselves now in the catching on phase. Investors, and most notably young athletes with money, are starting to invest in sports franchises either as majority or part owners. Patrick Mahomes is a great example of this as he's a part owner of the Kansas City Royals as well as the Major League Soccer team Sporting Kansas City. Serena Williams and Bryce Harper are 2 other young professional athletes who decided to go the franchise ownership route. Williams is an investor in Angel City FC, which is basically a women's MLS team, while Harper is an investor in the Philadelphia Union of the MLS. Soccer is growing rapidly in the United States, so perhaps these 3 are onto something here. Publicly disclosed investments such as these show that there's always an angle to get some skin in the game. We can search the World Wide Web endlessly and come back with a bunch of former athletes, businessmen, and celebrities who own shares in a sports franchise as a part of their portfolio. Alex Rodriguez, Devin Booker, Giannis, The Rock, the list goes on, and as more people start to catch on, the investment will become even more lucrative. There's no doubt that owning a professional sports franchise has been one of the most profitable investments of the past century. Anyone who bought within the MLB, NBA, or NFL prior to 1980 is up a cool 20,000% or more assuming they have diamond hands, but with an average annualized ROI of 13%, even buying certain franchises 15 years ago could have made some serious change. Now, does this mean you should go out and buy your local Little League team? Probably not, but it does beg the question. What is the maximum amount of money that a professional sports franchise can be worth? See, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but the US dollar is an inflationary currency, so more and more supply is added over time. More money circulating means prices of goods go up over time, and this relates to franchises because ultimately revenue has to increase at a relatively constant rate of change. At some point, and it's hard to say when, but something is going to shift for the biggest of pro sports organizations. When we have teams valued at $100 billion plus in the future, players are going to expect upwards of billion-dollar contracts. And that's where we start to question, what does money even matter anymore?